Everybody loved Harry Truman. Or was that Harriet Tubman? I don't know, but all that matters is that one started a war and the other was a hero. Actually, never mind. Apparently he was a hero too. After a favorite Franklin D. Roosevelt died, Harry S. Truman took his oath in the office as the 33rd President of the United States of America. All this happened and World War II was still going on. The easiest route to ending it all was dropping the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ending the war and causing the Japanese to retreat. Not only was Truman ready to end the war killing a bunch of people, but he was also ready to just stop interacting with the communists of the Soviet Union and any communists at all. Because of the influence of communism that the USSR or the Soviet Union was spreading around, Truman was ready to give any kind of support to any country to keep the ideas of communism contained. That was all by his Truman Doctrine, which basically, like I said, was a support from the US to any country that was threatened by the Soviet Union or communists in general. In the Yalta Conference, FDR was there. He was willing to work with Stalin and basically divide up Germany between the other countries. They had many other deals that they made between the US and the USSR, and Stalin agreed to all of them. But then, when FDR died and Truman took the role, he wasn't motivated to continue working with him. In the Potsdam Conference, there was some tension going on between them, and many things such as the dropping of the bomb weren't discussed during the conference. Anyways, basically Truman was just really against communism.
Forced to keep any agreements that he kept. He broke 16 agreements that were made at Yalta, and he broke 32 agreements that were made at Potsdam, 48 altogether. He never kept a single one of them.
So he passed the Marshall Plan, which was basically like the Truman Doctrine, but it provided aid to Western European countries who promised to stop communism from spreading. It rebuilt most of Western Europe and reconstructed everything that was destroyed in the war.
Wars never settle problems. They only create new ones. Boston on the Marshall Plan, which was the rehabilitation of Europe, that it would require about $17.5 billion over a 4-year period for the restoration of these foreign countries that had been devastated by war. The thing we did then was to set up in every country a program known as the Marshall Plan.
Although he was reassured now that he had countries on his side, implementing the Marshall Plan marked the beginning of the Cold War between the United States and its European allies against the Soviet Union, which already had control of most of Central and Eastern Europe and established its satellite nations. Basically, the Soviet Union did not appreciate the lengths Truman was taking to stop communism, and that's why the Cold War began. It began with the Berlin airlift, blah blah blah, ended up supplying it by air, and you know the story. Then, in 1949, the creation of the NATO took place. No, not NATO, NATO. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization was formed of a bunch of countries, like the US, Canada, and several Western European countries. You can think of it like the hadith where if one body suffers, the rest of the body suffers too, talking about the believers and all. But here, you're talking about nachos. Just kidding. But seriously, it was collective security. If one member of the NATO was attacked, then it would be as if the whole NATO was attacked as well. Anyways, a month later and the Berlin blockade was finally lifted and everybody was happy. The containment thing wasn't only happening in Europe, because for the most part, many countries in Asia were also communist. For example, China and North Korea. China and Japan still had their problems together. And what's worse is that when internal problems happened in China, America sided with the nationalists, supporting them with $2 billion. Truman was too focused on Europe and forgot about the communists in Asia, and that's when everyone started to say he lost China, because he failed his own doctrine. In Korea too, he tried with the UN in uniting the country, but obviously, Soviets who were by their side were definitely not happy. He wanted to go beyond his doctrine, beyond his goal and unite North and South Korea. And with the backing of China to the North Koreans, MacArthur wanted badly to attack the Chinese with the atomic bomb, complaining that Truman's approach was not strong enough. Offended by this, Truman threw him out, but then his rating fell, and he decided he wouldn't run again for presidency. And there you go. That's about everything. Well, almost everything. Truman's presidency was a turning point in America's foreign affairs, because now there was obviously lots of enmity between US and other nations, the USSR and its satellite nations, as well as the Chinese and the Japanese, and of course the North Koreans. It was a complete 180 flip from the presidency of FDR because of his ideals and priorities. But even then, he was able to successfully follow his policies and his doctrine. And now, isolationism wasn't something America would continue following because of the involvement with the NATO, etc. The Truman Doctrine and his policy of containment lasted almost 50 years. However, do I think he was a good president? From what I think, there is no such thing as a good president. He either saves his people and kills other people, or saves other people and kills his people. There's never an in-between. Yeah, sure, he did successfully fulfill his plans, but they weren't always good. But overall, I think he was close to being a good president. And there you have it. This concludes our conversation about Harry Truman, the 33rd American president who led his country through the final stages of World War II and through the early years of the Cold War.